Shadows on Olympus. The return of ancient beings. The night over the city was dark, and the wind brought a chill as if running through forgotten tombs. The city of Santa Rita, located in a dark corner of the southern USA, had always been known for its mysterious events. But this time, even the bravest souls sensed that something was wrong. Was it just the unpleasant smell coming from the ancient forest, or was something much worse approaching? The answer to this question was found by a group of young people who came to the city for summer vacation, unaware of what awaited them. Mick, Emma, Dave, and Lisa had always been fans of urban legends, which is why they decided to go to Santa Rita to investigate local rumors about strange phenomena in the forest surrounding the city. The locals spoke of a place that had once been an ancient sanctuary dedicated to the gods of ancient Greece. All these rumors pointed to the idea that forces, capable of awakening only under certain conditions, appeared in the forest, and that they were extremely ancient. Mick and his friends didn't believe these stories, but curiosity got the better of them. The uneasy atmosphere of the forest was evident from the start. Each step on the wooden floor awakened an ancient scent of dampness and decay, and the invisible gaze they felt was like a look from another world. Stones steely covered in runes, resembling seals that held deadly secrets, towered among the trees. Lisa was the first to notice a strange crack on one of the stones, and it caught her attention. She bent down to examine it, but at that moment, her vision darkened, and it seemed as though an unbearable whisper was emerging from the depths of the stone. "It's just a myth, Lisa," Mick said, but even he noticed how the air had changed. Something was wrong. They continued their way deeper into the forest until they stumbled upon a forgotten sanctuary, hidden in the dense trees. Among the stone altars stood ancient statues, still marked with traces of blood and damage. The statues were not human, they resembled creatures from ancient myths. Half human, half beast, covered with snakes, with chains hanging from their fingers. This was where the real terrifying journey began. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and sounds that resembled the echoes of horrible voices began to emerge from the depths of the sanctuary. They saw the stone walls crack open, revealing a dark abyss. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they realized they had awakened something not human. Without hesitation, Mick grabbed Emma's hand, but as they tried to escape, the statues came to life. These were not just stone figures, they became shadows that merged with the darkness. Their faces were scarred, their eyes glowing with a red fire, and snakes slithered from their bodies, twisting and trying to squeeze them. A portal opened, and a creature emerged, a dark, large, monstrous being with a face that resembled a many-headed snake. It was Medusa, the most fearsome of the Gorgons. Her gaze could turn a person to stone, and her horrific body shed black poison that decayed everything in its path. This wasn't just a sanctuary. It was a trap, Lisa whispered, realizing they had become part of an ominous plan that had been in motion for thousands of years. They tried to flee, but with every step, the darkness grew closer, and with each breath, a new creature from Greek mythology appeared. Bloody, monstrous cyclopes, malevolent chthonic gods, and even Typhon, the massive beast capable of destroying all living things. They all began to understand that these ancient gods were not just sleeping. They had been waiting, and now, having awakened, they sought to take their souls to be reborn in a new era. The look in their filled eyes became even more terrifying as strange figures appeared on the horizon. Witches, whose beauty was merely a mask for their demonic souls. They began chanting ancient spells, and at that very moment, the ground beneath their feet shook. If this night ends, terror will become an eternal part of this land. What happened next? Nothing mattered anymore. Death and horror walked hand in hand. Mick, Emma, Dave, and Lisa ran, their hearts beating in time with every step. The forest seemed to come alive around them, as if the trees were witnesses to the ancient horrors that had awakened deep within the earth. The night was so dark that they couldn't see their hands or faces, only the echoes of their steps and the body in front of them, which gradually became more bizarre. Emma, unable to withstand the horrific tension, turned her head back and saw eyes that no longer belonged to living beings. They glowed with a red, piercing light. As soon as she saw them, the whole forest froze, and for a moment, she felt as if she had become part of this dreadful nightmare, with no way to turn back. "Don't look. Run!" Mick shouted, but it was already too late. The sound of cracks in the trees thundered again, and a large dark shadow appeared before them. Medusa. Her eyes, like flames, stretched out of the darkness, as if a mother reaching out to her victims. But something was wrong. Her face wasn't frozen and motionless, as described in the myths. Now it was changing, turning into a liquid dripping over the stone surfaces of the sanctuary. "This isn't just Medusa," Lisa whispered, grabbing Mick's hand, her eyes wide open. "She's not alone. This great evil has awakened all of them. And we are just walking to our doom." There was no time to think. Dave, who had been running ahead, suddenly stopped as black sand began to rise under his feet. He tried to leap sideways, but his body seemed to fall into a soft trap that consumed him from within. The true nature of this place began to reveal itself. It was an ancient Greek tomb that swallowed anyone who dared to tread this path. Dave screamed, but it was just a faint echo. The sound dissolved into the mist. Now only 3 people remained: Mick, Emma, and Lisa. They continued to move forward, though each step felt heavy, as if the earth itself was trying to hold them back. "Don't stop," Lisa cried, realizing that every stop would bring even greater darkness. "We need to find the way out. We need to find the source of this curse." All 3 knew that only one thing could save them: the closing of the gates that connected this world to the world of evil, the world of ancient gods. They didn't know if they were capable of doing it, but they were united in their resolve. They had to try. They reached a stone arch, which seemed to be a sacred portal. At its peaks glistened snakes, traces of the ancient gods, reminiscent of Medusa, but these were beings who had survived entire eras. Lisa grabbed her backpack and pulled out an ancient book they had found in the local library while preparing for the trip. The book described a ritual capable of breaking the ancient curse. Mick and Emma stood, gripped by fear, as Lisa began to chant the incantation. But with every word she spoke, the stone statues around them began to crack and come to life. The sanctuary's walls glowed with a red light. Heavy, deep shadows began to move around them, and another entity appeared, a large one, with eyes that looked mercilessly upon them. It was Typhon himself, awakened from his centuries-long slumber. Typhon, the greatest monster that had once destroyed many worlds, was advancing. His heads, like countless snakes, fused into one enormous beast, tearing its way out of the earth. He roared, his hand raised to the sky as if demanding a sacrifice. Mick tried to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. His eyes saw what had become their end. Lisa and Emma realized in that moment that their struggle had been meaningless. This was part of an ancient game in which they had become pawns. And before the darkness completely engulfed them, the last thing they heard was the sound of stones falling into the abyss. It was the god's oath. No one could escape their eternal cycle, and this night only dragged them into the void. And then the entire forest around them began to absorb the night once again, as if this nightmare would never end. Lisa, Emma, and Mick were swallowed by the darkness, and it seemed that their souls had been dragged into the abyss, where they became part of the cursed forest. But the story didn't end there. The dark forces that had awakened were not ready to leave them forgotten forever. They wanted more. More victims, more blood. No one could have predicted that Mick's fate was not yet sealed. Just when he thought he had perished, he felt the cold, rusty earth beneath his feet. He opened his eyes, but not to what had been before. Instead of the dark void, an ancient stone hall loomed before him, where, instead of light, only dark flashes barely illuminated the huge frescoes on the walls. This was not just a tomb, but a true underground realm that should never have existed in the world of humans. Here, there were not just mythical gods, but those who fought for dominion over mortals, descending into this world through portals hidden in the shadows. Mick felt his muscles go stiff with terror, but he couldn't escape. His hands were tangled in a web of magical chains. He heard whispers. At first faint, but with each moment they grew louder and more piercing. The whispers seemed to come from all around, as if the very walls of this underground hall were whispering their story to him. "This is not the end," whispered a dark, female figure rising from an ancient throne that had seemed lifeless, but now came to life. Her face was grim and eternally serpentine, but the terrifying contours of her face gradually transformed into an ominous smile. It was Eris herself, the goddess of discord and destructive forces. Her appearance became even more horrifying as she approached Mick, her eyes, burning with their gaze, turned toward him, making him feel completely helpless. You've become part of this, Mick. You did this when you intruded upon my sanctuary. Her voice sounded like the echo of hell itself. You, like all the others, have become a trap for your friends, and now you'll be part of us, part of this forgotten realm. Mick tried to remember everything he had seen, all the mythical creatures that had awakened. Medusa, Typhon, Cyclopes, chthonic gods. They were not just stories, they were real. And now he was among them, among those who had no right to return. They too will become part of this world, Eris added, casting a glance at the empty stone thrones where other evil deities, such as Hera, the goddess of jealousy, and Ares, the god of war who had turned into a fiery creature overflowing with rage, had gathered. We'll take your friends, just as we've taken you. And soon we'll return to the world of humans. They will all be our servants. The sound of his own heart grew hollow and deafening. He began to realize that this was not just a curse. They were gathering power. All these gods, who had slept for thousands of years, were ready to seize the world, and now he had become part of their plan. Suddenly, the stone wall before Mick cracked, and a new figure emerged. It was none other than Hercules, the hero from ancient legend. He looked as depicted in the myths, strong, mighty, but something was wrong with him. His face lacked any human expression. His eyes were empty. This was just the shell of the hero, used by the gods to lure victims. You were very brave, Mick. Hercules' voice was soulless and cold. But I won't save your friends. They too will fall into the trap. Mick began to understand. He and his friends were not just victims, they had become part of this game, part of a terrifying strategic battle in which they could no longer win. It turned out that all of them had become part of an ominous circle, an eternal cycle that revived the old gods and allowed them to touch this world again and again. But Mick decided he could not just give up. Even in the face of this terrifying power, he resolved to find a way to defeat them. This was a new turn in their fate. Now Mick had become part of the horrific force that had to find a way out of this world, even through sacrifices and battles with the gods surrounding him on every side. His search for a path to victory would become even more difficult.